Rebuilding the history of copper pots manufacturers for cooking is a long journey. A journey that can take months and years. The information is very difficult to find. Today they left us treasures that serve in our kitchens. And we are curious to know who they were. When we search for someone's history, we inevitably discover places, cities, villages, regions, streets, and so many other things. We discover men and their times, their work and their ancestral know-how. And all this simply because this work has come to us today. And in front of this beautiful work, these beautiful kitchen accessories, we have a great desire to know more. To not forget their history and pay tribute to these great artisans, I start today with the House LEGRY of Paris. LEGRY in Paris is without a doubt one of the best culinary copper pots manufacturers in the world. He made pots so beautiful that today they are still usable. Once again, the story of this famous Parisian house comes from far away. The character of the LEGRY family that interests us is Paul. So here is Paul LEGRY. Who is he? Where is he from? How did he manage his career in the world of cooking? Why are his fabrications still appreciated today? That's what I'm going to show you through this little documentary. To tell the story of Paul LEGRY, we must go back in time to the 1800s. At that time one can easily imagine a very rural France. Paul LEGRY was born February 2, 1865 in Coyolles. This village has always had between 150 and 400 inhabitants for more than 200 years. Coyolles is a very small village located about 90 kilometers northeast of Paris. Today this distance seems so short. But in the early 1800s, it is good to remember that the means of transportation were not those of today. The opportunity to travel by diligence allowed to do it in 10 hours and more. From 1861, a line of rail between Paris and Soissons allows the people of Coyolles to enjoy a much faster trip. And this is a good thing for the young Paul LEGRY. We will see in another documentary that this railway line will also benefit other famous manufacturers of copper pots. The village of Coyolles is very small but still has a castle. The activities are mainly agricultural. The very big family of Paul LEGRY is largely in the field of agriculture in Coyolles but also in a large perimeter all around. Before talking about Paul, it's important to talk about his family and especially his grandfather. He is the important factor that indirectly links Paul to the world of cookware. His grandfather was born in 1812. He is a farmer in Coyolles and Berzy-Lersic. He is also the mayor of Coyolles between 1837 and 1859. Very often families were very numerous at that time, with many children. Sometimes 6, 8, 10, 13 children. It seems that Paul's grandfather had only one son, who was also farmer and mayor of Coyolles. So it's Paul's father. Paul will have 3 sisters and 1 brother who will all stay in the Coyolles area all their lives. He is the eldest of his sisters and brother. Paul's father died very young at the age of 33 in 1871. Paul is still a child, he is only 6 years old. He has no uncles or aunts. But as I said before, his family is very big. I very often noticed the incredible solidarity that there was in the families of that time. A solidarity often interested but a solidarity anyway. Paul's mother, without her farmer husband, cannot handle the farm work and the education of her children alone. And that's how we go back to Paul's grandfather. In 1871 he is 59 but certainly does not have the best position to look after his grandchildren, all very young. And this is where I discover the starting point for Paul LEGRY. Paul's grandfather's brother, Paul's granduncle, had 8 children. 2 children of this great uncle will determine the future of Paul. There is Gustave and Henri. At this time it is not uncommon to find, in a family that has many children, some who decided to live adventures away from home. And this is valid for Gustave and Henri. First we discover a LEGRY hardware store in 1863 located at 195 Faubourg Saint-Martin, Indiana, Paris. Nothing proves that it is in relation with Paul LEGRY, but it is very probable. The year 1870 gives us more precision because we discover Gustave, who is a hardware store at 172 Rue du Temple in Paris. It is not impossible that it was he who was already installed in 1863 at 195 Faubourg Saint-Martin. I can follow Gustave until 1882. From this date, not knowing his date of death, we can suppose that he is dead. He does not seem to have a wife or children. Logic wants his inheritance to go to his family. In 1887 we see for the first time Henri, who is installed at 115 Boulevard Saint-Germain. Its main activity is household items. This means all accessories related to the house, including our famous copper pots. Now you better understand how a little fatherless, living in a predominantly agricultural region, got in touch with the world of commerce in the big city. And this certainly since a young age. When his cousin Henri settled at 115 Boulevard Saint-Germain, Paul was 22 years old. But we cannot doubt that he had already known the hardware stores with his cousin Gustave. I think that without a doubt, Paul was raised partly by his cousins in Paris, with most certainly going back to his home village to see his mother and his brother and his sisters. His experience of the clientele, the equipment, and the way in which a business is run in Paris is an important asset in his life very early on. One can easily imagine that he had to spend hours and hours in the stores of his cousins since his youngest age. In 1891, he is 26 years old. He is a commercial employee, but it is not known if it is for his cousin or for another company. At about the same time we learn that he works as a hardware store in the Rue des Saussayes, which is right next to the Miromesnil Street. In 1893 he is an ironmonger at 91 Boulevard Richard Lenoir, but we still do not know if it's for him or for a boss. In 1896, his cousin Henri died in February. He has a wife but no children. At this date, there remain among the brothers and sisters of Gustave, Leon, and Henri, 2 sisters who will die in 1898 and 1900. We can assume that the death of his cousin Henri brought Paul what it took to start an activity in his own name. Thus in June 1896, Paul acquired a boiler making located at 2 Rue Miromesnil in Paris. This address is the historic address found on most stamps of LEGRY's copper pots. He buys this boiler making from Monsieur Duval's widow. This boiler maker had his workshop at 17 Miromesnil Street while the home was at number 2, located on the famous Place Beauvau. Duval had been in place since 1885. And before him was the House Cretin, which also had a boiler making at this address. In parallel, Creton, which was a very old house that traded articles from Paris and Lyons since at least 1838, had an address also Rue Montmartre and Passage Saulnier in Paris. We understand easily that Paul LEGRY does not start at the bottom of the ladder with such a beautiful antecedent. In October 1897, Paul married Marie Berthe Baunaud. Life is beautiful, and this year 1897 sees the birth of his first daughter, Cécile. He is 32 years old. From what I see, he does not live in his workplace. He settled with his family in Meudon. His experience as a commercial employee and his knowledge in the field of hardware are definite assets. He must have a great comfort with the particular clientele as with the professional clientele. And then it does not start without nothing. We must not forget that the Duval house was installed at this address for more than 10 years. He has also taken over the customers of Duval. At this time, restaurants need copper pots. Many pots. And tinning, this service so precious, is a priority. You and I will tin our copper pots every 5 years, every 10 years. This depends on our use. But at that time in the restaurants, the tinning of the same pot could be done every month. It's quite difficult today to imagine a restaurant that serves thousands of meals a day. Not to mention the canteens of schools, administrations, the army, hospitals, and so many others. Believe me, for the cooks, the priority was not to take care of the pots. The knives, fork, riddling with steel whips, scraping meats with metal utensils in the bottom of tin pots was a normal thing. Everyone knew that the pickup for tinning was done regularly. And then there were the bourgeois houses. There it was different. Everyone wanted to have the most beautiful cuisine, with the brightest copper pots. It was a wonderful time for manufacturers and sellers of copper cookware. There was enough work for everyone. The year 1898 sees the appearance of the LEGRY house for the first time in the yearbook. Of course, the name is written in small letters. And even if they were wrong in the spelling, I think Paul LEGRY had to be proud. The year 1899 shows a more serious yearbook for him. His name is written in large letters below the Gaillard house. Here is a sign of success that does not deceive. In 1901, he has a second daughter, Renée. Life is on its way and everything is going well in the business world in Paris. The years go by and